Hey, Johnny. Hey, Steve. Good morning from me, and good evening to the two of you.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing well. Merry Sithmas.
Yeah, I've got it. The beard obscures it, doesn't it? Like, there's no way I'm trimming the beard, but that's like, oh, I've not got the logistics quite right there with this setup.
I
So,
thought I
what?
would like matching you with my other Star Wars Twitter as well, but I feel like I wanted to do a diverse coverage of nerdy IPs, for Christmas.
It is
I've
cool.
just got a I've just got a bit of London, unfortunately, not a nerdy one, but
That's the
I
gear
hope
thing,
is that
right?
the
irrespective of
London skyline?
Britishness, then I'm in London. Yes, very much the London skyline here. So
Nice.
for a British majority here. So.
I don't think you can buy Christmas jumpers with the skyline of Preston. I don't think that exists.
At some point, there just needs to be a textile factory that can stitch like a 3D printer for knitted sweaters, where you can send it an image and it will like make it for you. Like if it doesn't exist, it should.
I mean, that's obviously that could just be the next revenue stream for analytic endeavors. That's it. You'll make millions. You don't have to do data
Right?
anymore. Textiles, Christmas jumpers. Oh yeah,
Exactly. Let people upload AI approved images just to make sure there's nothing nefarious being sent through.
nice. I'm down for it. I'm here for it.
Well, thank you for coming back on. This is your third or fourth time, I
Yeah.
think, between the two channels that you've been on for things.
Yeah, 3, I think. A hat trick. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was right around there. Exactly. But yeah, like we've done these on and off over the last few years. I think a couple of times in Hammond's Consulting. Now bringing you over to here. But as we usually do, I think before we get into the content and the nitty gritty of some of the nerdy stuff we'll be talking about today. My screen was flickering for some reason. Wait, if we can get a brief introduction from you and maybe anything interesting that you'd like to just share about yourself or kind of what you're doing these days, and kind of start from there.
Yeah, cool. No worries. So I'm Johnny Winter. I am based, well, as I've already made reference to, I'm in the UK in Preston, Lancashire, up north. I work as an independent data consultant. So I worked out this year that in the UK, at least, my data career is now old enough to have a beer. So I've been doing it 18 years now. That was like way back in the day doing crystal reports, if anybody remembers
Oh wow,
those
yeah.
things. Yeah, for old school. And then the last sort of 10 years or so kind of had a bit of a Microsoft focus and doing like sort of old school SQL Server and that kind of stuff. And then, yeah, last sort of maybe 5 or 6 years, more sort of cloud-based things. I guess I worked a lot in industry previously, whereas my last 4 or 5 years have been more in the consulting space, working with a lot of things in Azure. I guess like, so when I started like doing like data community type stuff, so when I started like blogging and doing sort of the odd videos and the odd sort of bit of public speaking, there was like a massive Power BI focus for it. So I've always been a big Power BI geek, massive Power BI fan, but my breadth of experience does go beyond that. So I'll kind of do the sort of full data stack really. So get my hands dirty with all sorts. And yeah, I kind of 4 or 5 years ago, when was it? 2021. So 2021, I started my website, Grayscale Analytics. Originally, that was just a blog and a website, just to like share stuff really. And everybody thought that I would like it was a business, and it wasn't. It was just a hobby. It was just a pseudonym. And then this year, I quit my job, and it is now a business. So I work for myself as a data consultant, doing all the data things.
Awesome.
So I love some of your shirts that you've done too with a few of these. So like I've seen you probably know the one that's most commonly worn, but what is as upstream as necessary, right? Yeah, I believe so. For
As far
Matthew
as upstream as
Roach's
possible.
Maxim.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's probably one of my best sellers. I think I might have sold maybe double digits. Yeah, I do have on my website, I do have a t-shirt store with various silly captions and t-shirt phrases, which is just for fun, really. It's definitely not a a big income stream for me. It was just something set up for fun. But I love swag. I love merch. So
Well, and with AI now a little bit, it's if you know the catchphrase that you're trying to do, it is a little bit easier now to like make something that's not just literally the text on it. Like you can make the shirt look cool with a funny phrase if you can come up with the tagline. I think.
I feel like I've got my style now though, like that just kind of like basic. But yeah, I might have to dabble with that. That might be worth a good shout. Probably the other tidbit that's always worthwhile dropping in, like Grayskull from Grayskull Analytics is like totally a He-Man reference. It kind of like I was a massive He-Man fan when I was a kid. Like I
You say
find
that
him
as if you're not now.
well, I mean, so to be fair, I would say
To be fair,
as it stands currently, I'm more of a Skeletor fan, like a bit more of an anti-hero. Got the old Skeletor figurine over my shoulder. But yeah, it's always worth dropping that in when I do an introduction, because if I ever present material, there tends to be like subtle He-Man references scattered through it. So when people go, "Why is there a picture of Skeletor in the middle of this slide?" It's like, oh yeah, by the way, there's a tie-in with the name of the company and things like that. So always worth dropping.
To be fair, he's very memeable. Like the amount of like he tells you something at least on Instagram and he runs away like until we meet again. It would always be these random factoids. Like it was, He-Man has been very heavily memed, specifically Skeletor.
And
do you ever follow?
Go on.
Say Johnny on LinkedIn. If anyone ever follows Johnny on LinkedIn, you'll definitely see a lot of these memes. A lot of He-Man data memes. So I like the combination there.
And they are all AI as well. Yeah, 100%. Definitely worth checking out. Are you following the fact that they're doing a live action film next year? They're releasing a new Masters of the Universe film. So Jared Leto is playing Skeletor. So yeah, looking forward to that coming out. I'll be there with my popcorn.
We did like I love the idea of He-Man, but I would can Jared Leto stop being a thing in like Hollywood movies? His last two ones have bombed so bad. Like he's not a bad actor per se, but like what was it I love Daft Punk. I was very sad of how bad the last movie was, and like what was the Morbius was terrible. Like it's I don't, he's a good actor. I don't think he's a leading action star actor, or like, he needs small bit parts where he can be weird on his own.
Yeah.
Is my small digression.
I think that Hollywood have fallen out of love with him a little bit, haven't they? Like you say, Tron Ares absolutely bombed.
Well, to be fair, the plot was horrible. The music though, that is a great soundtrack. Is one small digression. With Nine Inch Nails taking over for Daft Punk as for the movie, if you haven't listened to it, it's a really good album.
See, I've not seen that film yet. I did, so I was fortunate enough to be at Disney in Florida earlier in the year, and there's a Tron roller coaster there, and that was amazing. That was one of the best things. So yeah, I love my roller coasters.
My last just little comment on that is if at any point don't watch the movie to watch the movie, consider the movie to me a music video for the album. Literally just have the album on with the video just playing in the background. Like that's the correct way to watch the movie, is you're not actually even watching it. Pretty visuals and you get a cool soundtrack.
Nine Inch Nails is right on my street as well, so I can definitely be on board with that.
Yeah. It was the first time I think it's the first time they've ever been credited as Nine Inch Nails. Normally when they do movies together, it's Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor. They've never actually been billed as Nine Inch Nails while doing a movie. It's always been their name. So that was the first time they've ever been billed as that, as a little factoid.
Movie trivia.
But with that, because I can nerd out of this stuff for forever. But coming towards the topic of the day, what's some of the cool stuff that we get into?
Sure. So I guess like I've titled this Data Modeling for Superstars, and it's one of those where I was quite proud of that as a title because it's got double meaning. So the idea being that it's very much focused around data modeling for star schemas. I guess as sort of the Power BI geek in me, like the number one rule of Power BI, you want to be using a star schema. So it's about modeling superstar schemas, but it's also about an approach to data modeling that can turn you into a superstar of data modeling. So it's sort of, that was kind of the double-edged meaning of the title, which I was like, hey, that's cool. I funny. So yeah, that was the idea behind it, and it like very much the idea is, I guess I didn't want to just talk about what is dimensional modeling. Like it's sort of, the literature on it's like 30 years old. It's
Mhm.
pretty well covered. For me, it's kind of like the discovery of how to do it effectively by doing it collaboratively, like not falling into the
Okay.
trap of kind of, I guess I call it like ivory tower data modeling. That kind of like, oh well, I'm a data person. I know better than the people that are actually going to use my reports. I know what they'll need. Um, so yeah, that's the idea behind it. That's the inspiration for it, really. And it's ultimately it's like a set of techniques that I've been doing it this way for at least 2017 was the first time I ran a workshop like this, and like that's in my pre-consultant days as well. That was just working for an online retailer at the time. And it's just an approach that I've kind of refined over the years and just don't know, got it down, got my thoughts down in paper and stuck it out there. And yeah, people seem to sort of receive it quite well.
Cool. There you go. Clicker. I wanted to, excuse me, just comment on one of the things that you mentioned with having to build it to the audience. Like I 100% agree on and I like to tell my customers, like I built hundreds of reports at this point, and you will never build a report. Like even I cannot build a report fully correct the first go. I can get it closer to maybe what's needed or a model, but it's never going to be perfect without input and collaboration. In my case, it would be like feedback from the audience and being delivered to. But 100%, like yeah, there is it takes a village to raise a model. Actually, that would be a good shirt quote right there. I like that. But yeah, I agree on that aspect. So it's you need input from the people who are going to be downstream consuming something like this and following the KISS methodology to a degree, because it's people are curious creatures, and if you give them a field to use or a button to click, they will use the field or they will click the button.
Yeah. And ultimately, what we're building is for their benefit. Data modeling as a discipline doesn't or shouldn't exist for the sake of keeping data professionals busy. It should be, oh, hang on a minute, I've got some people who work in the same organization as me and they need to make better sense of the data. What is it they need to know? What is it they're trying to achieve? How do they view the world in terms of the way they run their business? So yeah, for me, it's like
Exactly.
all about getting those views of the world in there. So I've got a few like slides to accompany it. Like I tried to keep it quite light, to be honest. This is like a full scale presentation that I've presented at a few different
Love it.
places now, but I've stripped it back to try and make it sort of a little bit lighter. So I don't know if you want to sort of bring up the screen and I can talk through a few bits. So yeah, in the first instance, this is kind of the scenario that I'm looking to try and avoid. So I guess, I think both of you folks have been doing this probably a similar amount of time to me. Is this something you're familiar with?
The
Yeah.
stakeholder, yeah. Well, it's the I always think of this as it's the manager in the rock scenario. If they ask for a rock, you bring them a rock. Like, no, this isn't the rock. What do you want? I don't know. You bring them another rock. Like, no, this still isn't the right rock. And repeat that 40 times.
Yeah, exactly. So this image comes from a book called The Information Product Canvas. It's by a guy called Shane Gibson. Shane's a really lovely guy. He's like, up until this year, he's based over in New Zealand. He's actually just moved over to the UK. And I've been lucky enough to meet him, and we've sort of collaborated on a few bits and bobs. And so this is actually a page out of his book, which I've got a copy of here, and I highly recommend buying. Send me the check in the post later, Shane. The stuff in that is different to what I'm going to talk about today. Like it's his book, The Information Product Canvas, is about collaborative ways of getting requirements for data projects. Whereas I'm sort of talking more about the data modeling aspects of it, whereas his is a little bit more sort of broader in terms of the end deliverables and things like that. But it's a really good book. Definitely recommend it. And yeah, it's kind of just this particular page in it, like really, really resonated. So definitely worth checking Shane out on LinkedIn. I think it is quite often quite easy for data professionals when this happens to blame the stakeholders, to be like, oh, well, they don't know what they're talking about. They're not data people. We're the data people. We know what we're doing. It's their fault for not really explaining what they meant. And I think sometimes there can be a little bit of hubris there as well, in terms of sort of, as the data guy, I know better than you. And I think sometimes it makes sense for people to sort of take a bit of a look at themselves, like a little look in the mirror, and sort of think, actually, here I am, sat in my little data cupboard, churning out reports and data models, most days. I think it can be quite easy to lose sight of actually what the business does on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's always important to make sure that whatever you're building is there to serve the business and to benefit the business. So again, this is another
One of my
one.
favorite memes.
Yeah. So this I got off Benjamin Rogosian. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of his name. So Seattle data guy. He doesn't even live in Seattle anymore, but he's Seattle data guy. Did you know him? Have you ever come across him, Reed?
Say the name one more time.
Benjamin Rogosian. I'm probably saying it wrong, but he goes by Seattle data guy. He's got quite a big LinkedIn following, and he does.
The name
YouTube
sounds
stuff
pretty
as well.
familiar.
Yeah,
pretty popular on social media. I think I've seen a lot of his stuff, not met him personally, but
yeah. So I got to meet him at Data London earlier in the year, and he's a really lovely guy as well. But yeah, he stuck this meme up on LinkedIn, and this idea that actually, for all the moaning that data people do about business users not being data literate enough, maybe we should start to try and be a bit more business literate and start to think a little bit more about, how we can understand the business better and understand business needs better. Ultimately, I think one of the themes with that is this idea that data modeling should be a contact sport. So there's a phrase out of I'm just quoting books at people all afternoon. I've got like a shelf of them here. I'm just going to quote them at you. The Fundamentals of Data Engineering, which is a book by Joe Rees and Matt Housley. There's a phrase in there about, I think I'm paraphrasing it slightly, but this idea that data modeling should be a full contact sport. And that's kind of the image that springs to my mind when talking about it. But yeah, this idea that it shouldn't be a case of just hiding in a room and deciding what data models should be amongst the IT guys. Get out there, get your hands dirty, get speaking to the business, understanding what the business do. So that's very much the sort of idea behind data being a full contact sport. And ultimately, one of the keys to success is kind of, for me, encapsulated really, really nicely in a quote from a very wise man. So it's a guy called Robert Van Winkle. Stop, collaborate, and listen. Do you know what Robert Van Winkle's alias is? Anyone familiar with Robert Van Winkle?
I mean, I know Stop, Collaborate, and Listen. I was like, it's a song. Yeah.
There you go. Vanilla Ice. So yeah.
Oh yeah, because that's his actual name, right? Yeah, Vanilla Ice.
Yeah, totally. So Vanilla Ice. Stop, collaborate, and listen. So for me, kind of one of the sort of what's the word for it? Keys to success in terms of good data modeling is, just take a second. Don't just go off and do it blindly by yourself. Stop, collaborate, listen to the business, and that can turn you into a data modeling superstar with that particular superpower, the superpower of collaboration. How do you do that though? It's very easy sort of saying, people should collaborate better. And I guess what I've kind of worked on over the sort of last few years is this kind of framework for being able to do it, almost like a sort of step by step in terms of the ways you can do it. You've got these two different personas. It's very much a case of you've got the developers, very technical, write code, understand the tech. I think I've worked with some fantastic developers over the years. They can write the sort of best possible indexing strategy for a SQL Server database, or they've got the most optimized DAX, or they've got the best compression out of their data models and all those kind of things. But with them being so techy, they'll maybe lose sight a little bit of what the business want. And then the business users, they understand the business and they know what they see, but they're not always great at explaining it. So we want to kind of get those two groups of people in the room together, having conversations about what it is, they're trying to achieve and what to build. And the way I do that is by mashing together effectively these two different requirements gathering and data modeling type techniques. So one of them is called Beam. One of them is called sun modeling. Anyone, either of you folks heard of either of those? Have you heard of Beam?
We
I've
use
heard of
Beam
Beam.
quite a lot.
No, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
quite like Beam, especially from a data warehousey kind of perspective into. Yeah, definitely.
Beam has been quite well adopted in quite a few places. How about sun modeling? Is that something you've come across at all?
I came across this in
No,
your
I
blog,
agree.
Johnny. So I read this
Nice.
blog.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
quite niche. It's almost like I talk about it being like a word of mouth type thing. So Beam comes from this book by Lawrence Core, the Agile Data Warehouse Design. Again, it's me quoting books. I think all data professionals should own this. The first half of it is predominantly around requirements gathering and how to really sort of like tease out requirements from your users, and is fantastic. The second half of it is a bit more kind of based at sort of technical professionals and implementation, and it's sort of
Yeah.
various patterns that are kind of quite a lot of it's sort of very Kimball adjacent, and a lot of sort of similar stuff to that as well. So I was lucky enough to meet Lawrence a couple of years ago as well. He's a really, really lovely chap as well. Definitely worth your time if you ever get a chance to talk to him. So Beam itself stands for Business Event Analysis and Modeling, which for me, when I first came across this, kind of pivoted my thinking about like how I do data modeling and how I think about dimensional modeling and star schemas. Because I think like studying Kimball, he'll talk about modeling business processes. And if you dig into it, Kimball does talk about business events, but the phrase that seems to stick is modeling business process. Whereas Lawrence Core talks more specifically about events and this idea that to model
Okay.
effectively, you think about the fact that an event has happened. Let's capture all the data points around that event, and how can we do that effectively? So my mindset kind of pivoted from modeling business process to modeling business events instead, which I found really, really useful personally. There's two bits of Beam specifically that I rip off with my approach. So something called the 3Ds, something called the 7Ws. So I'll go into those in a little bit more depth a little further on. The other sort of idea that I've ripped off, because this is the other thing as well, people have kind of like given me some credit for like this framework in the past, and ultimately I've ripped off other people. It's not particularly full of original thought. It's more kind of, here's a couple of things that I liked, and which bits could I
How you
use
organize it, right? Like you've arranged it in a way to like say that what's compatible and not. So you've orchestrated them together.
Yeah, to an extent. Beam's fantastic. I found Beam always really, really in depth. And I wanted something that was a bit more lightweight. So I kind of discarded some of the more in-depth bits and kept the bits that I found easy. Some modeling, as I say, is almost like a word of mouth technique. Like I always think about it being passed down from generation to generation of BI professional. There is no book. I can't point to my bookshelf and say, if you want to know about sun modeling, go read this book. This guy is credited with inventing it. So Dr. Mark Whithorn, who does the analytics course at the University of Dundee up in Scotland, he teaches it as part of his course. I know off the top of my head at least 4 people that have attended that course in the last 10, 15 years. And I first learned about sun modeling through working alongside those people, and then ultimately kind of adopted it and started running with it myself. I might even do some modeling wrong because it's kind of almost like Chinese whispers. But again, I've kind of sort of taken some of the theory about it and just applied the way that I wanted to do it. So when I was taught about sun modeling, I was taught about basically these 3 different kind of views of the world in terms of types of data model. So the idea of a user model, a conceptual model, and a logical model. So an example of a user model is something like this. It's like a report. So a user model is ultimately the way that users think about their data. So that could be charts, graphs, and tables effectively. I don't know whether either of you in the past have like started out on a project and the customer or the client or the colleague, the stakeholder gives you something they've sketched out on a piece of paper and they say, oh, I want this, give you a nice wireframe potentially. From a data modeling perspective, it can be like a good starter for 10 in terms of understanding what you might want. So if I look at this as an example, I can see that I want to see revenue by product category. So my revenue probably needs some kind of sales facts table. I'm going to need some kind of product dimension potentially, and that product dimension is going to have categories in it. I can see from the line graph that I want to be able to trend unit quantity over time. So I'm going to have to want some kind of date dimension potentially. And my sales table is going to want to have unit quantities in it. They want to do an analysis by channel, for argument's sake. So I might need some kind of channel dimension. And then that table there has got like various additional product attributes in there. So it'd be a case of my product dimension now needs to have descriptions and things like that in it. So that can be a good start for 10. But the classic with this is that you go away and you build it, and then the very next week it's like, oh, that was brilliant. Thank you so much. Can you now split this by region for me? And it's like, all right, well, there was no mention of region when I was doing the requirements. And so I'm like, oh, well, it's I have to go back to the drawing board and redo my model and all that kind of thing. So it can be a good start for 10, but really you want to be a little bit more holistic. You want to be able to anticipate what the next question is going to be, and maybe even give them more than some of the requirements they're asking of you. So yeah, user models can be useful, but they tend to be a bit blinkered, a little bit narrow in focus. So if I move on to the logical model, this is more of an idea of a logical model. So the idea of a database ERD diagram. Oh, one step too many. And this is fantastic as a technical professional. If I hand this off to a developer and I'm going to say, right, that's what my fact table wants to look like. These are the dimensions that I need. I've got things in here like I've got my primary and foreign keys defined. I've got my crow's foot notation that's showing my cardinality. I've got my data types defined in this. This is fantastic as a technical document. Do you think you can go to your stakeholders and when they ask you for something, you say to them, yeah, no worries. If you just give me the ERD, I'll go and build it. No.
Doesn't work that way, unfortunately. Yeah,
exactly. It's not. This isn't how the users think about the data. The users think about the data the way the user models are. This is the technical blueprint. So we've got here this kind of two extremes, this kind of one that's very blinkered and possibly a little bit too vague, one that's very, very, very detailed and just going to be overkill from a sort of business or a business user's perspective. And we're looking for that Goldilocks approach. So what's going to be just the, nicely in the middle of it. And that's where the conceptual model comes in. The conceptual model, when I showed this to somebody once, described it as almost like a mind map of your data. And it's just this idea of like pictorially demonstrating how everything hangs together and just sort of what the key data points and what their relationships to each other are. Very much built in business language, like try and always build them with the vocabulary that your stakeholders want to use. And yeah, that's the conceptual model. So sun modeling is effectively a technique of building out a conceptual model. I know that there are other conceptual modeling approaches. If I say conceptual model, some people might look at this and go, that's not a conceptual model because a conceptual model has a different notation. This is a version of a conceptual model that is the version that sun modeling helps to build. And that's ultimately what this collaborative approach is looking to do. It's to build a conceptual model that both the business users and the technical users both understand and both agree on to give you an idea of what to go away and build. So,
but I think you've hit on a good point on it's true to the semantic models. I think are very are unique somewhat to the modeling universe because in the back end, like you follow entirely Kimball methods and naming conventions and all of that, but that is often way too technical for that end user, as you mentioned, especially for self-service. So there's a degree of almost like not bad, but like not non-standard practices in terms of naming or where things are placed and how things are organized. Because it needs to make sense from a person who doesn't understand relational models, where they can just draggy, clicky, clicky,
Yeah.
clicky, draggy, droppy
Yeah.
type stuff over from that. So you have to aim towards making it make sense logically to them, not how it makes sense logically to a database.
100% that, exactly that. And I think the other thing to bear in mind is that quite often the operational systems that we're building on top of are structured very, very differently to the way that the humans that interact with them think about it. So it's kind of, really you want to try and you want their interpretation of the data, not what the system design, the way the system was designed, interpretation of the data, because people will never use the system the way it was designed in the first place anyway. So yeah, I guess the whole data modeling for superstars idea is that we're looking to get to a conceptual model. So how are we going to do it? We're going to get everybody in the room. I talked about Lawrence Core's 3Ds from Beam. What are those 3Ds? So the 3Ds are discovering an event, where you ask the question, who does what? Describing an event, and we describe an event using the 7 Ws, and documenting that event. And for my approach, I use sun modeling as my way of doing my documenting and actually capturing my design. So that's where the 3Ds come from.
Okay.
Starting with discovering an event and who does what, I'll tend to, in my workshop, and sometimes I split this over 2 workshops, to be honest. Sometimes I'll have a session where we'll do event discovery, and then I'll give people a few days off and we'll reconvene before we go into the other Ds. But the idea with discovering an event is understanding a particular business area, a particular business process or a department, and asking them, right, okay, within your remit, what are all of the things that happen? What are all the things that you're responsible for? What are all of the events? And to describe an event, or sorry, to discover the event, we always ask the question, who does what? So a very, very simple example would be that a customer buys a product. So I think my whole example is going to be based around sort of quite a simple transactional retail type example. And that always has an actor and an action. So the actor doesn't necessarily have to be a person. It's easy to think of a customer as always being a person, but it might potentially be a system or an organization as well. But there's always some kind of actor and there's always some kind of action. They do something, the event is caused by that. So I'll tend to get people in a room, we'll figure out all of their events. Some of those events we'll throw away. We'll say, right, we've identified all the things, all the events that happen within a particular team. But actually, half of those have got no real analytical value. So we'll not bother with those. The ones that are left over, where do we think we can get the most value if we're going to build some analytics? And we'll try and prioritize them. Once we kind of prioritize a particular event, so in my example, customer buys products, we'll go on to describing the event, and we describe the event using the 7 Ws. This is the pretentious English student in me. So this is a quote by Rudyard Kipling, little poem. I keep 6 honest serving men. They taught me all I knew. The names are what and why and when and how and where and who. So the 7 Ws are an evolution of that, effectively. So it's who, what, where, when, why, how, and how many.
Yep.
You have to forgive the fact that how and how many are very tenuous Ws. There's W in there, I guess, but they don't quite neatly start with a W. But they're described as the 7 Ws. So for a given event that we've identified, what the who, what's, when, where's, why's, how's, and how many's about that event. So we can then start to identify all of the relevant data points. And some of the idea with that is so that we're not blinkered by a specific dashboard spec. We want people to think outside of the box a little bit and maybe consider some of the things that they might not have thought of, like, oh, where was something bought? So that when they don't come back the next week and say, actually, I need this split by region, and I didn't think of that the first time round. So to do that, the documenting, having described it with the 7 Ws, we use the sun model. So I have myself like a sun model canvas that I'll use for this. I'll tend to put the event in the top of the canvas as like a reminder of what it is that we're looking to do our data modeling about. I'll have my 7 Ws on the page as well, so that we can, as a reminder of what they are. I change the order. I always prefer to start with the how many. So I start with the how many and then work my way through the list. So for customer buys an event, what are the how many's associated with this? So it can be the how many's or the how much. So you start with a circle in the middle, which is the sun or the sun diagram. And when you think about a customer buying the product, the how many's are all the things that you're going to want to aggregate or trend and things like that. So it's the things like revenue, cost, profit, margin, those kind of things. The measures, effectively, if you've got your Power BI hat on, it's ultimately the things that are going to you'd show in the middle of a graph. You'd sum them up in a bar chart, or you'd trend them using a line chart, that type of thing. I tend to find that kind of a good half dozen to start with is a great way to get the ball rolling for this sort of this particular approach to it. Try not to let my stakeholders that are in the workshop get too hung up on thinking of everything ever. Just as a good sort of half dozen or so is normally a really, really good start. And what you tend to find is once you've got the core ones, the key ones identified, most things from after that become derivative anyway. So if you've got revenue and you've got cost, you can derive profit from those things anyway. So just getting the key things identified is the most important. So once you're happy with your how many's, you move on to the who's. You say, well, who buys the product? And if we've used that particular strategy of who does what, we already have the answer to who, because it's already written down in the event title. So the who is the customer. So in my Sun model, I'd add a spoke and I'd create a customer object. Having identified that object, it's not a case of stopping there. It's a case of saying, right, okay, well, what do you like to know about your customer? So perhaps they want to know things like customer name, date of birth, demographic, gender, that kind of thing. For the sake of demonstration, I've kept my customer object relatively small because I've had customer concepts on conceptual models that get vast because people want to know all sorts of different attributes. But you get the idea. It's like, okay, you've identified that you want to be able to know about your customer. What are the things about the customer you want to be able to know? Once I'm happy, or the stakeholders are happy that they've got all the information about the customer that they're interested in, you say, okay, let's move on to the what. Much like with the who, because we've done who does what is how we describe an event, the what's on there as well. So the customer buys a product. So the what is the product. And again, we don't stop there. It's a case of saying, okay, well, what information would you like to know about a product? And then you add additional elements onto your Sun model. So things like product codes, product names, descriptions, colors, categories, those kinds of things get added on there. Once we've done the what, move on to the when. So I think every data model I've designed ever always has some kind of date object in there. And then you sort of say, right, well, what about your dates do you need to know? So people might want to know things like, well, the month and the quarter and the year. In the example here, this has been captured slightly differently. So rather with customer and product, we've got separate spokes for every separate attribute that people want to know about. The date, we've got this straight line with month, quarter, and year. And that's to denote hierarchy and the fact that people want to roll up by that and potentially create hierarchies, which especially in a Power BI context where you can actually physically create hierarchies becomes really, really useful. You can always create.
I mean, in theory, you'd want that on the product table or something else too. If there's a hierarchy, yeah, you'd want like maybe product name with another line, the product category.
Yeah, absolutely. If the product categories, as you say, yep, and like things like brands and manufacturers, I think are quite common hierarchical ones as well.
Yep.
Yeah, the hierarchies can be anywhere.
True.
I've even seen things like for customer demographics, almost like hierarchies of demographic and things like that as well. So they can pop up anywhere. Yeah, my example is like really simple and deliberately quite brief in theory. Right, so we've done the whens. So we've done who, what, when. After that, you move on to where. Where does the customer buy the product? Well, they buy it from a store. You can have both individual attributes and hierarchies on the same object. You can mix and match. It's absolutely fine. Geographical information is another really good common sort of hierarchical use. So you can roll up, you know, city or city, state, country, region if you wanted to. Once you've done the where, you move on to the why. So why did the customer buy the product? Why can be a bit abstract. It is not uncommon for people to struggle to answer the why did the event happen. For a retail example, they bought it because it was on promotion. So I've captured information about the promotion there. Then how did they buy the product? So again, the how might can be again a bit abstract, but in this instance, how did they buy it? Well, what was the payment type? So if they paid cash, card, bought it on finance, who was the card or finance provider for argument's sake? And that is a very rudimentary and simple example of a sum model. So when I'm doing the workshop with stakeholders, I really try and avoid referring to these things as facts and dimensions, but the Kimberlite in me, the dimensional modeler in me, looks at that as a conceptual model and says, okay, that how many in the middle is a factor table. That's going to be my sales factor table, and that's the data that I'm going to need in it. And I've got this off there, a customer dimension, a product dimension, a date dimension, and so on and so forth. So that's the idea. That is ultimately the way to go about it. As I say, it's designed there to help people sort of think outside of the box a little bit and try and more holistically capture what the requirements might be by prompting them with those 7 Ws, as opposed to them getting bogged down on the fact that they want a specific chart that shows one specific thing.
I guess it's really good to give us like with requirements gathering to give that to the whoever's essentially scoping this out for you from the client, and like it gives them clear, easy, like, all right, here's 7 questions, fill this out, and get a pencil and paper and draw it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always try to do it like relatively. I much prefer to try and do it in a room if I can. In this day and age, obviously so much happens remote. So I've like done things with like Miro boards and things like that remotely. But just being able to stand in a room and like draw it up on a whiteboard or use post-it notes has always been like a really favorite approach for me. And yeah, that's effectively the approach. There's a couple of things that are worth calling out. Again, for the sake of demonstration, I just did one of each of the W's, but in reality, you don't stop at one. So on this example, when we did how many, and we did, right, well, we'll do who after how many, the who's the customer. I wouldn't just stop there. I'd say, right, who else? Because in this scenario, retail, you might have had a salesperson, for example, in which case I would draw a new spoke. So it doesn't come out of the customer spoke. It's a brand new spoke for the salesperson. And then I'd say, okay, well, what do you need to know about your salesperson? Okay, well, we want to know the salesperson's name. We want to know the salesperson's manager, what department they're in, like those kinds of things. So the fact you need to ask the 7 Ws multiple times, bear that in mind. Location's another good one with that. You've had the store location, but maybe you need a delivery location if it's a delivery order and those kind of things. Not being able to answer the W's is fine as well, though. So it's not about a tick box exercise that says there has to be an answer to every single of those 7 questions. If somebody says for a particular scenario, oh, actually, I can't think of anything, that's fine as well. It's just almost to try and prompt them. For me personally, it doesn't matter what category it comes into either. So when I do the what, and somebody might say, somebody would be like, oh, the supplier, is a supplier a what or a who? I don't actually mind. I don't really care personally. It's more a case of saying, right, well, I've prompted you and you've given me the answer, and whether or not you've classified that as a what or a who, it doesn't matter. It's more about just getting the gears grinding, as it were. I always do one sum model per event. If you try and do, it's really important when you do the workshop to focus on the customer buys product event. If people start trying to like do stock measures and stock questions when you're talking about customer buying, it becomes kind of like, no, that isn't, whether or not you when you restock, for argument's sake, and you're placing stock orders and you're doing like the warehousing side of it, that's a different event to the customer coming in and buying it. So keep them separate. And that does mean that sometimes you might want to hold multiple workshops. So, I mean, you could do one giant workshop where you do lots of events, but people get like a bit of workshop fatigue. So I always try and keep it focused on one event at a time. That can help you deliver a little bit more incrementally as well. So you just do one event and then they've got something that works. You can do this before data discovery. So when I say data discovery, I mean sort of that part in the process where somebody gives you the log on to the database and says, right, this is what we want you to build. Go and find where the data is. My personal preference is I do this exercise before I've even seen the data. I think sometimes we can be influenced too heavily by what we can already see is there, as opposed to what the stakeholder actually wants to see. So I try and do it beforehand. And I try not to let people get bogged down in what they already know about the data as well. So the stupid example I
Yeah.
always use for this is like if we are doing our customer objects and somebody says, I'd like to know customer eye color so that I know whether or not people with blue eyes or brown eyes might buy more TVs. And everybody knows that eye color is not going to exist inside of the the CRM.
Well, that's
Capture it
why we have
anyway.
correlation is not causation, right?
Yeah. What is it?
There's
Margarine?
a I don't know if you've seen it. There's a website or a subreddit.
Spurious
It's charts
correlations.
with, yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a bunch of
Yeah.
silly charts of like the just things that perfectly match up over like often by like year or something, but demographic data. It's always really interesting. Like I saw one recently was the name Daniel and arsons in the United States. They both like perfectly follow this trend down.
I don't know why I always remember this one, but margarine consumption and divorce rates.
Yep.
Apparently,
Hey, if you have less like fats or butter type substances in your life, you are unhappier. So that makes sense.
That's always my go-to. I think it's an unbelievably strong correlation, that one. So
Yeah.
yeah, fun times. What was I saying? Oh, don't get bogged down in what you know about the data. But yeah, basically, you can use this as like a gap analysis sometimes. So if somebody actually genuinely has a business case that says, I do need to know why more people with blue eyes, buy fridges than people with brown eyes, they can justify that request, and you can possibly feed that back into your business systems teams. And it's like, actually, there's a data point we're not capturing. So it's kind of nice to sometimes be aspirational with some of this. I always quite like to do as well. If you want to, you can take your conceptual model and then go away and design a proper logical model after the event. So if you want to do a proper ERD where you've got all of those, the cardinality and the primary keys properly defined, you can. I've worked in teams in the past where if we had that conceptual model, I could give that to the team and they knew exactly what they were doing. They'd just go away and build it. When I've worked in consultancy, I've found that sometimes clients want a bit more reassurance in terms of what you're actually going to build. And so they've asked for it to be converted into a logical model. But you can do that if you want. This is not the fixed finished design. This is not a contract that you are saying to your stakeholders, great, you define that requirement, I'm going to go away and build exactly that thing. There has to be a massive dose of pragmatism with this because things change.
Yeah.
Part of that can be like the aforementioned eye color. You go to do the delivery and you say, oh, actually, really sorry, we can't fill that requirement because the data is not available. But it's just a case of having a grown-up conversation and feeding it back. Sometimes it can even be things like the stakeholders identified two concepts, and then when it actually comes down to it, they're the same thing. And so you can do some consolidation at that point. It's almost like it's the oh God, this sounds pretentious. That conceptual model is almost like the muse. It's the muse for like the thing you want to build. It's got everybody talking in the same terms and agreed on a happy path. But ultimately, when it comes to implementation, there's got to be a little bit of give and take potentially. Last tip here is if you want to, you can consolidate multiple submodels into a bus matrix. So bus matrix is a Kimball artifact if people aren't familiar with it. where you can just have an idea of sort of commonality and conformed dimensionality. That can be quite useful for planning and getting a good idea of like which level of effort in terms of which events to focus on when it comes to delivery and things like that as well. And it can just be a nice artifact to be able to share. As much as I love using this framework, it does have a few things to consider. It always assumes one-to-many relationships. So it doesn't have any, in that conceptual model, it doesn't really have any ways to call out any junky many-to-many type relationships that you might end up having. So if you need to get into the realms of, I don't know, you're modeling banking and an account has 2 account holders because it's a joint account. When you do that workshop and you capture that sum model with a stakeholder, that's not really explicitly called out. And the other thing it doesn't explicitly call out is dimension types. So we've identified potential, our potential dimensions in that conceptual model. We haven't really called out whether or not we need them to be history tracking, whether or not we want type 2 dimensions, all those kind of things. So they're just some extra considerations that this kind of approach doesn't explicitly call out. As yet, it's never tripped me up. It's always kind of come out in the implementation phase. But yeah, just worth bearing in mind. And my absolute last takeaway from this is that hopefully, like, that as a framework that I use and that I've had some success with, I like try and almost talk to the idea that this sort of, use this as inspiration for how you might want to do it. Like if you sort of have watched the live stream today, or you're watching back on a recording and you're wondering why everyone's wearing Christmas jumpers, it's because we recorded it in December. But yeah, if like bits of that are like, oh yeah, that's a cool idea. Actually, I might give that a go. And then if you decide to do it a different way, I'm not going to hunt you down and say, well, you used my framework wrong. Like even I basically took some bits of Beam that I liked, some bits of sum modeling that I liked, mushed them together and had some good results with it. And then this is how I prefer to work going forward. But if there's parts of this that you think are horrible and you don't want to use, it's fine. Make it your own, do what works for you type thing.
I had I just thinking of like some of this is I've had a client like in the last year where like I think it reminded me of like an episode of like Extreme Home Makeovers where like the person looked at their place and was just like aghast, like what have you done? And I had a customer that was like somewhat agitated, like what on earth is this? Like I had to mitigate, like these are all first builds. The point of any session is like I am not. I don't care about anything that's on this page. We can scrap it all. We can start again. But like we're aiming to build this towards you. So what do you like? What don't you like? But to your point, like nothing is immutable. Everything can be changed if it doesn't add value. If it's on a page, even because we can only build to what we think will serve you well, but we don't know that until we hear back from you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's always got to be a level of pragmatism with that.
Yeah.
I guess one of the things that I've always tried to achieve by this framework is to try and get those stakeholders and decision makers in the room quite early and get those inputs early. And I do tend to find that does help you get to version 1 being closer than it might otherwise have been by taking this approach like that.
I'm a huge fan, I think, of processes and this kind of templates. My advice for everyone is always follow some sort of process like this, right? Make it your own. I think something's a lot better than nothing. I feel a lot of us have gone in without kind of following something like this, and it's just been very struggling to understand what to do. So I love having this sort of stuff, and I think you seem a bit more professional, I think, when you come in and run these meetings.
Even if I turn up with a Star Wars Christmas jumper and a Santa hat.
even that, Johnny.
Awesome. That was all the material that one other point I was going to make is that when we talked at the beginning about data professionals moaning about the business stakeholders not being particularly data literate, like an absolute side effect I've found of doing this is almost like stealth data literacy training. Like if you've gone and sat and done a sun model with a bunch of non-technical users and then 2 or 3 weeks down the line, you say, right, okay, we've built this semantic model, we've got this dashboard. There's a self-service capability here, so that if I show you around this, you'll be able to, plug into Power BI, connect to this semantic model, and maybe do some self-service. And all of a sudden, the thing that you've built in the self-service model resembles the thing that they described to you. And like this idea of like, oh, hang on a minute, so I can look at my sales by customer by dragging and dropping this, becomes a little bit more intuitive for them. So like a nice side effect of that is this kind of almost like stealth data literacy training as well. And just them having a bit more skin in the game. I think we've never had them involved early, and they've sort of gone through this team effort. That when it comes to go live, we're going to release this today. They're a bit more, excited, a bit more anticipation for it being live. Anyways, that was all of my materials. There's a QR code there that's got all of my various contact information in case anyone wants to reach out. I can't even remember what's on the QR code. There'll be a link to my website. There'll be a link to my LinkedIn in case people want a healthy dose of Skeletor memes. But yeah, ultimately that was it. Anyone any questions?
And can you drop in our private chat just the link that this takes us to? And I want to make sure that it's in the actual chat. And I'll put us back to our screen here while you do that. And I also just want to pop up the message where bust matrix is underused. Comment from a little bit earlier.
Indeed. So how many people think that bus matrix stands for business matrix? Because that's always a big bugbear, because it's not. It's an omnibus matrix. Got nothing to do with business at all.
Okay.
There you go.
I never thought about it, but okay, yeah. I mean, honestly, if you were to ask me, I probably would have guessed business. But it's omnibus. Okay, all right, that's good to know.
So omnibus being about a collection of things. Yeah, there we go. So almost as good as your movie trivia.
A lot of these bus matrix and things, as you alluded to earlier, Johnny, we use a lot of this, and I think even just having really simplified versions, having a nice kind of your own spin on things and just your own way of doing stuff, I think it just really helps you get a bit more focused and well-designed models, which is, most of the effort when coming to BI.
Yeah, I can't remember who I was talking to the other day, but I ended up there's a Jeffrey Wang quote about the fact that Power BI is a model-centric BI tool. I rolled that one out the other day. It's like, yeah, absolutely.
For people like us, it's like when you see a quote like that, it's like in my mind, like obviously, like, but it isn't for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very guilty of taking for granted the things that I know. Sometimes I've kind of, I guess, in recent years had the realization that actually I've been doing this for a long time. That's why I know these things. Be a bit more forgiving of people not realizing some of this stuff, but.
I'm sure there's a term for that, but it's like expert bias, right? Like you're so knowledgeable about something that like when somebody's not, it's like like that's obvious, right? Like, no, you've been doing that for 10 years.
Yeah, I kind of always feel like it's like paired with like good old imposter syndrome as well. So I'm almost like sometimes I'm like, yeah, I'm okay at my job, but I'm nothing special, and that leads me to think that the stuff that I know, if I don't think I'm very good, then surely everybody knows the stuff that I know. And that sometimes it's like, oh no, actually, no, I am quite good at what I do.
It's good to have a little bit of humbleness or a small amount of imposter syndrome, because I think that encourages you to, to keep trying, right? If that goes away, you can probably become a bit complacent and lazy, and your knives start to lose their sharpness.
There is some interesting studies about the correlation, and I'm sure this wasn't on spurious correlations. I'm sure there's a real thing, but kind of the correlation between it was high achievers and people who have imposter syndrome, and it was people who have growth mindsets tend to suffer the most from imposter syndrome as well.
Yeah, well, it's because you can always be better, and therefore you are an imposter of a better version of yourself, because you always see the next thing you can learn or anything else. But it makes a lot of sense. The higher you aim, the bigger the gap, and the bigger the gap, the more of the imposter part there is, because with that stuff. So it makes sense.
So
yeah.
As we start to wrap up, and I'll drop the link to Grayskull in here as well. Like, are there any resources, videos, links, best things that you'd recommend that you haven't already mentioned before? As any final takeaways of things for people to check out that would be interesting.
Sure. I mean, like, I guess, well, specific to data modeling as a topic, like it's a well-worn path. I really do think that everybody should have a copy of Kimball. Everybody should have a copy of Chris Adamson's Star Schema. I think people should have a copy of Lawrence Coe's book on agile data warehousing, and then Shane Gibson's book as well. That's not specifically about Star Schemas at all. He's actually a Data Vault guy. He loves Data Vault, but I'll forgive him that because his book is still very, very good, and he's like non-specific to like particular, modeling paradigms and things like that. In terms of me, I write about quite a lot of this stuff on Substack. So always good to check people out on there. People want to connect on LinkedIn and say hello if anyone's got any questions as well. Always do. And yeah, keep your eyes peeled. I'm doing various articles coming up on dimensional modeling, not just this stuff, even some of the sort of more back to basics type stuff as well. I think the Kimball material, even though it's sort of 30 years old, over 30 years old now, I think, and it's fantastic. But also, I think people think that because it's old, it's a little bit irrelevant. So I'm kind of trying to breathe a little bit of 21st century life into it and almost dispel some of the myths about the fact that it is defunct because it's old and technologies move forward. Like for me, it still makes so much sense.
It will be irrelevant when we get rid of relational modeling. As long as that's there as a design for databases, then yeah, I think that's going to continue to be relevant, right? Like they're, even like Edward Tufte and like chart junk, like there is, it's still applicable. Like his whole thing was, why waste ink when you need to on a page? And it's, and add complexity. And you can easily adopt that into any modern visualization toolage and have the same idea with report elements, chart elements, stuff that can be turned on and off. So it's, I think you just have to like adopt it for the time, right? Rather than take it for gospel exactly as written. But there's a lot of wisdom in stuff like that.
Like from the Viz perspective, like as you say, you've got like Edward Tufte, you've got Stephen Few, and their stuff's quite old now as well. But you've got like, people like Cole Nussbaumer Affleck, or is it Affleck Nussbaumer? I can't remember which way around it is. But she did storytelling with data, which is like, breathes more life into the subject. There's a lady called Stephanie Evergreen who's got loads of great material on visualization. Kat Greenbrook as well. She did a book the other year. It kind of feels like it's a topic that kind of continues to be trendy and revisited. And then dimensional modeling, there's not been anything new for pushing 15 years now. It's interesting looking at got Donald Parrish in the chat talking about Ralph Kimball's now been retired for 10 years. And like nobody's really taken up the mantle since he sort of moved on. And he's put Kimball since 94. So I've been doing quite a bit of research on this. And it's like, well, the first edition of the book was published in 1994, but the publishing of the first book was built off the back of a good 10, 12 years of actually practicing this in consultancy and establishing the patterns. He didn't sort of pluck the patterns out of thin air and decide to write a book one day. It was based on 10 years of application and, the culmination of, work that started in the late 70s and sort of progressed through the 80s before the book happened. So it's even older than that, really.
I think if you're looking to learn stuff as well, a lot of people get worried with AI changing so much. There's a reason things like dimensional modeling, star schema, even, the SQL language has been around so long. I think it's a good bet to have something stable to invest in now. I tell everyone learning, start with that, right? Learn how to do this kind of stuff, the fundamentals.
Good fundamentals is, I think, one of my favorite phrases this year.
Say that one. Say the phrase one more time.
Good fundamentals. Focus
Yeah.
on the fundamentals.
It's a
Somebody
good
said to
one.
me, you know, should I learn Databricks or Snowflake next? How are your fundamentals? What do you mean? Can you explain the theory? What theory? Right. Can you learn the fundamentals? Worry about the tech another day.
So I think with we got final links. I got those in the chat here. Any final sage words of wisdom to put a bow on it before we leave, if any?
Stop, collaborate, and listen.
Nice.
There we
It's
go.
good sandwich on that. Then you got to follow with like dun 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 dun. Do you ever see the interview where he's like they're asking him about copyright versus from Queen?
Yeah.
He's like, no, Queen's dun 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 dun, mine's dun 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 dun. See, they're totally different. It's like I share the same thing. But he's trying to justify his beat.
Somebody once asked me in a job interview how I was at performing under pressure, and I was like, "Oh, I prefer Bohemian Rhapsody." Hey, sorry. This is I've seen Reed do karaoke. I've seen Reed pull out Tenacious D performance before.
That'd be cool.
I've seen him pull out some butt out games. So there you go.
Yeah, I do enjoy my karaoke. Yeah. Well, if you're ever in whenever you're back in the area, Johnny, we can do a karaoke night. I need very little excuses to do that. So
if I get across to Seattle and some good karaoke joints you can take me to, I'm well down for that.
We got a lot of good places that where you let you rent the rooms too, which is better. You don't have to wait 2 hours for your turn at a large bar.
Nice.
Perfect. Well, I think then with that, we can use that to sign off. Then I want to thank you for coming on. I actually learned a couple of new modeling practices for this. I like that it was a good tackle from a conceptual perspective, software agnostic. This is just how you go through your planning phases, and I think some good thought exercises that you can give a non-technical person. Or don't write down what metrics you need. Start from approaching your questions and build this out. I think that will be really useful. So approval to that.
Cool, good stuff. I'm glad it was hopefully, as you say, taught you something.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking forward to getting you back on next time. And I'll see you at one of the upcoming conferences here in the sometime in 2026.
Fingers crossed. Take care.
Excellent.
Thank you.
All right. Cheers.